Welcome to the Christ Church Leadership Podcast in the Wesleyan Tradition. I'm Charles Kyker, your host. Today we're looking at a reading that can be a bit confusing. Part of it is that Jesus speaks this parable, but unlike many other places, he doesn't really explain it. And, sometimes it's like a good joke, I think. If you tell a good joke, if it is a good joke, you don't have to explain it. I wonder, though, if contextually it had its own deeper meaning, whereas when you and I read it today, it's like, wonder what he meant by that. It's kind of like this particular phrase. You know, as people of faith, there are many things in our life we should be grateful for. We should be grateful for. We begin to think about blessings, or we begin to think about things that God has done for us. Therefore, gratitude should emerge. But today, I want to challenge you to turn that around and be grateful for the things that God has not done. Be grateful for the things that God has not done. So here we are, Luke chapter 13, beginning at verse 6, when Jesus said and told them this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there was any fruit on it. But he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to his gardener, I've waited 3 years, and there hasn't been a single fig. Cut it down. It's just taking up space in the garden. The gardener answered, Sir, give it one more chance. Leave it another year, and I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer. If we get figs next year, fine. If not, then you can cut it down. Figs were incredibly common in that region of the world in Galilee. They're actually common today. If you go to the Holy Land with us, and we're going in February of 2025 at Christ Church, you'll see that figs are everywhere. They're common. That environment grows them and grows them well. So they're in mass supply. Perhaps one meaning is that, if this thing isn't producing fruit, then I'll find a fig tree that will. So because they're so common, uproot it and plant another one, said the owner. But the gardener said, give it another chance. Give it another year. I'll give it a little more attention. I'll put some fertilizer on it. I'll care for it and see if it can't bring forth fruit. I'm glad that God did not answer certain prayers in my life. I'm glad God has not chosen to do certain things in my life. I'm glad, for one, that when there were moments in my life as a common southern boy in North Carolina in a very rural area, raised literally in the middle of tobacco fields, when my life wasn't producing much, he didn't just decide to move on to the next fig or say, he's taking up space. He's not really producing anything. I'll find somebody who will. I believe somewhere there was a voice that said, give him another chance. I'll invest a little something. I'll pour some spiritual fertilizer on him. I'll give him another opportunity. Because there are times when weeds are present. There are times when we're not producing what we should. I think about what Abraham Lincoln once said, die when I may. I want it said of me that I plucked a weed and planted a flower wherever I thought a flower would grow. And so Lincoln wanted to uproot things that weren't producing, but plant a flower, so at least a flower could be planted in its place. It's a noble thought, and it's a good thought, but I'm glad in God's economy when I have been more of a weed than a flower, that God did not uproot me. I'm also thankful that times in my life when I prayed for certain things, met a beautiful young lady my junior year in college. Began to see her. I was been in another relationship, and I appreciated that relationship. It was a good relationship. The friendship was of immense importance to me because we had grown deeply as friends, and I highly valued the person. But when it came to asking myself the question, who would I want to spend the rest of my life with, and who would I want to actually be with, I didn't feel a peace about that. And so that relationship ended, and it was during the summer that I met someone else. And I thought, this person is incredibly bright and cheery. I met her mother. Her mother was incredibly warm. Her mother was just an amazing lady. And so I thought maybe this relationship might go somewhere. So after 4 months of dating, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. So we were on. And 2 or 3 months later, we got more involved in the thought of being a married couple, serving in the church, her being a pastor's wife, even though I continually said that you do not have to allow the church to define your role. I want you to be who God's called you to be. I want you to serve where you want to serve, or to just simply support me and not feel that you have to live into any assignment or any role. I want you to be free of that. So I was very strong on that belief, because I had seen situations where women had become bitter. There were a few role models of men being the spouse of a pastor, with female pastors in the Methodist Church, but it wasn't quite as common back then. And I wanted to make sure that she didn't feel burdened by some kind of fictitious role. But it ended up that it was a moment of truth where she finally said to me, I don't want to be, I don't believe I can be a pastor's wife. And for the next several months, I prayed and fasted that her mind would change and that she would desire what she was not desiring at the time. So I lost a good bit of weight during that time. I didn't feel like eating. I fasted. And for the next 2 years, I didn't date anyone. Oh, I'd go to lunch with somebody, but I didn't date for the next 2 years. And when I thought that life was fine and I was going to live into whatever God had for me, and I wasn't trying to find someone, or I wasn't feeling the need that I had to have someone in order to live into the call, is when I met someone at Lake Junaluska during that summer, who was very intriguing, because right off the bat we started speaking about deep scriptural challenges in the life of leaders. What was it like to lead? What was it like to lead with the shadow mission creeping in, making you think that God actually needed you, and that God needed you to be where you were? And so we talked about the platform and the alluring nature of it, and how it could be the undoing of worship leaders, songwriters, musicians, how it could be the undoing of pastors. And I'd never met anyone where I could have that kind of conversation with, and have it with biblical illustrations in place, talking about various leaders in the past who had had those challenges and had met their demise because their hubris exceeded their talents and their giftedness. And so from that point on, I began to realize maybe this relationship is something that that God knew I needed to have. God didn't answer a prayer. God didn't meet a need years earlier. God did not do what I wanted God to do, because I thought it was best at the time for God to do that. 2.5 years, almost 3 years later, there was another opportunity for me to see the hand of God at work. So I'm glad that God has not done certain things in my life. So Julie and I did marry and served for 9 years in the western North Carolina area, and both in the mountains for a couple years and then in the Piedmont area. And then after going into the Beeson program, a doctoral program in advanced church leadership, I had my entire world turned upside down as far as possibilities for the kingdom and what a healthy New Testament church could look like, and what healthy leadership was supposed to be, and how Jesus primarily invested in multiplication, not addition. And so yet again, I prayed that I would have an opportunity to start a new church, plant a new church. I even had such a hunger for it when I found out Western North Carolina didn't have any new church plants in sight. I went elsewhere, Phoenix, Arizona. I was given an opportunity to plant a church in Scottsdale. Las Vegas, Nevada, the bishop gave me an opportunity to plant a church in Las Vegas. Went back to my home conference. Nope, nothing in Charlotte. Nothing in Charlotte. But I feel called to plant a new church. Well, we don't have anything. I said, well, I'll just work a secular job then and wait until you might have something available. And then finally, my wife did not have a peace about planting out west in Arizona or Vegas. And so we decided to come back to Western North Carolina. God did not give me what I wanted. I did not get a new church plant in Charlotte, one of the fastest growing areas in the southeastern part of the United States. I went to a little place called Hickory, North Carolina, where the population was 40,000 people. The whole county is 150,000, whereas a 30-mile radius of Charlotte would have been 1.5 million. God did not give me what I had asked for, what I had wanted. There was another assignment in front of me. However, I believe that whenever you're given an opportunity, or whenever you're given a situation, or a situation comes your way, you may think it is a second choice, not your first choice. But what I have learned is, if you're faithful and obedient, God can make a first choice out of a second choice. If you're faithful and obedient, and you think, really, this is where I wanted to go, this is what I really wanted to do, this was my first choice. If you're faithful and obedient, God can make a first choice out of a second choice. Last night, that became very apparent to me, because when Julie and I moved to Hickory in 1998 to become the second pastor, not the founding pastor, not the one who was able to start a church fresh and new, but we were the second pastoral family of a new church plant in Hickory that was still meeting in a storefront. We were able to buy a home in a subdivision just about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away from the storefront. And the subdivision we bought in was fairly new at the time. There was about 4 or 5 lots that had yet to be built on. But there was a subdivision behind us, 61 lots. And that subdivision had been held up because of some right-of-way issues. So I was a jogger. I still jog. I jog now more on the elliptical or treadmill because of my knees, but I jogged a lot back then. Didn't matter if it was asphalt, concrete, whatever. So I would jog in my neighborhood. Then I would go up the mountain there at Baker's Mountain, and I would jog over this 61-lot subdivision. And I prayed over every lot. I prayed over every lot, and I prayed that whoever would build there, whoever would move there, that they would one day know Jesus Christ personally as their Lord and Savior. That if they did not know Christ already, that they would have an awakening, and God would do a work of grace in their hearts and their lives. And I prayed that if they didn't have a church home, that they would at least visit Christ Church, and that many, and I said many because I didn't want to try to put God in a box, but I said, Lord, I pray many of them might come to Christ Church. But if not, I pray they'll go to some church in this community, because I wanted to have a Wesleyan kingdom understanding. See, John Wesley was a citizen of the kingdom of God. Yes, he died an Anglican priest. Yes, he helped to launch a movement that would be called the Methodist Church. But John Wesley, first and foremost, and always, was a citizen of the kingdom of God. He always had a kingdom mentality. That's what drove his mission, his ministry, his thinking. And that's why he said that he was homo unius libri, the man of one book. Oh, give me that book at any price. Herein lies enough for me, for salvation for me. So Wesley understood a kingdom mindset. So I was trying to do my best to pray with a kingdom mindset. God, let them go someplace to some church. And if possible, pray some of them may find their way to Christ Church. Well, it was about 1.5 years, 2 years before the first home was started. And eventually it was in the year 2000. That home was built. And it was a small, probably 2,000 square foot home. Everything, it was a concrete foundation. Everything was pretty much on one level, and then another home, and then another home. And I just kept running in that subdivision, praying over every lot and every house. Eventually, by 2006, 2007, many of the homes had been built in that subdivision. And one day when I was jogging in the subdivision, God reminded me of my prayers. And I counted no less than 13 families that were in that subdivision that were attending Christ Church. And then last night, I was in the home of one of those families, and I didn't pray this. I guess I didn't have enough vision to pray this. But in one of the homes I was in last night, there were 10 young men that had spent 10 months with a man being mentored in the Christian faith. And in this group, many of these men were teetering on their faith, were teetering on convictions and the health and their marriages and their relationships. And there were a lot of dynamics going on. But over a 10-month period, many of these men grew, first of all, in their walk in their relationship with God, and then they grew together as a band of brothers, and they learned to speak truth into each other's life. They learned to love each other, to hold each other accountable, and some would even speak truthfully. Several months ago, one speaking to another, saying, hey, you need to fix this. You need to work on this. You need to see a counselor. You need to go immediately and get help, because we care about you. We care about your wife. We care about your family, and we want to see you get well. You need to go get this. You need to get some Christian counseling. And so this kind of mentoring went on. And when I was jogging, there were times I didn't want to go down at the end of this cul-de-sac because it had quite a drop on it. And I was like, I'm already tired. I've already done about 1.5 miles. I'm just going to run up this little hill here, and then I can run back down. But I'd go down that blasted cul-de-sac and still pray over those 5 or 6 homes that eventually would be built down there, and I'd run back up. And at the end of that cul-de-sac is where we were last night, when these 10 men came up and were celebrated and prayed over and hugged the person who had mentored them for 10 months. And I just thought, God, I'm glad I'm in Hickory. I'm glad I didn't go to Las Vegas. My son would probably be a gambler today if he was. Maybe one of my daughters would be a showgirl. You just never know what the enemy would want to do. But this past Sunday, one of our granddaughters was baptized. And then the next night, I had a chance to see 10 men do life together for almost a year, and multiplication began. And they left with the charge that they themselves are now to be mentors. They are now to mentor others in the Christian faith. There are many things in your life and my life where we should be thankful for what God has done. We should be thankful for answers to prayer, things that He gave us that we asked for or that we needed. But there are also those things in our life that if we step back and contemplate them, we can also be thankful for the things that God has not done. Because in God's wisdom, God knew better. Thank you for being part of the podcast, and may God bless your fig tree growing, and may God bless you to be fruitful.